Welcome to Bible Study Hub. Ann Wiggins here with you, going through the book of Exodus. We go verse by verse through the Bible, and it really transforms our lives. And we're so grateful for that. Grateful for you being with us tonight as we do continue our study in Exodus. If you would like your name to appear with your comments tonight, and it's only coming up like Facebook user, that's how you do it. Just go to streamyard.com/Facebook, give it permission. If you don't want your name to appear, that's absolutely your prerogative and absolutely fine. So we're going to be finishing up Exodus 17 tonight, and Lord willing, going through Exodus 18 as well. So where we have been trekking along, as we've been saying every week, the children of Israel came out of Egypt, out of a very pagan lifestyle, worshiping false gods. They don't have the written word of God yet. And because the Bible has not yet been written, it's very difficult for them to really connect with exactly who God is. It's just not been fully disclosed yet. So they've been experiencing God and experiencing God. And as he shows himself to be faithful and to be their provider and their healer and to lead them and guide them and direct them and protect them, his expectation for them is rising. He was very compassionate, very kind, very understanding when they failed the first test, which was they had only bitter water and they complained they didn't have any water to drink. So he graciously gave them water. Then they didn't have food. And rather than saying, well, God provided water, we could probably just ask him to provide food. No, they complained and moaned and griped and said, oh, you brought us out here to kill us. And God graciously provides them with food. Then last week, there was no water. You would think by this point, they would be like, you know what? We know God well enough that we can trust him. But no, they complained and moaned. In fact, Moses says to God, I think they're going to stone me to death. Like, what do you want me to do here? This is serious. They're mad. And God provides water for them. So we've been through those. They failed 3 tests so far. Now we're coming up on a brand new test that they've never had before. This is a brand new one, but it's not the last of these. And that is that they're going to be actually attacked by an enemy in a war that they're going to have to fight to defend themselves. So we've got some serious stuff going on here. And we're going to pick it up in chapter 17 of Exodus and verse 8. So here we go. It says, Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. Now, Amalek is a guy, and he wasn't there. So if you're wondering, well, wait, it says that Amalek came. Who is he? Where was he? So the Amalekites, their founder was named Amalek. Amalek had a dad named Eliphaz, and Eliphaz had a dad named Esau. Does that ring a bell with you? If you studied with us in Genesis, Esau should ring a bell. Esau and Jacob, remember the twin boys that were born? Esau came out first. Typically, he would inherit the birthright, but God said no. Jacob, the second born, will inherit the birthright. And then there's a whole big thing where Jacob ends up buying the birthright from Esau at a rock bottom price. Esau feels like he was slighted. Major blow up. Esau wants to kill Jacob. Jacob gets sent away. There is animosity that follows for generation after generation after generation. Even though Esau and Jacob did come together at their father's funeral, basically, and seemed like they were okay with each other, their descendants were not. And so the descendants of Esau are going to continue to be a thorn in the flesh of the descendants of Jacob, which are the Israelites. So when it says that Amalek came, well, he was just the founder, the grandson of Esau, the founder of this particular, it was just kind of a nomadic tribe in that area. They had sheep, they would wander around. Well, here come the Israelites, and they're famous because of all the stuff that's gone on with them. So the Amalekites go, aha, descendants of Jacob. And look, they have all those sheep and they're going to want to steal our pasture and we need to get rid of them. And so they come and they attack Israel. So let's drop down to verse 9 to 13. So Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him, and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur, another leader, went up to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and one on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. In other words, Israel won. So, what on earth is this story? What a crazy account, don't you think? Now, this is what we typically think of and see. This is some painting from 1865 by I think it was a Dutch painter named Hanstein or something. So you can see he's depicted Moses there. It's got his arms up. You've got Aaron on one side, her on the other. I'm not sure what the little like dove wings over his head are, but that's typically how we kind of see it. But there is something that we don't want to miss here because a lot of people say, oh, the whole point of this was Moses was standing there praying. And when he would pray and his hands were up, then Israel was prevailing. And when he would stop praying and his hands went down, then the Amalekites would come and start to prevail. It's a very common, if you want to call it like a take on the passage or interpretation. And maybe that could be valid. I mean, I don't know for sure because the Bible doesn't really outright tell us what was going on here. But here's the thing is it never talks about Moses praying. And it would also then infer that unless your hands are up, you can't pray. I mean, could he not pray with his hands down when they got tired and God didn't accept those prayers? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So I kind of thought that through and I thought, I don't really see that one as being the case. So I read the passage over and over and over again, and I realized that I had kind of missed something. And that I'm going to pop it up in case you missed it too. Verse 9b. Tomorrow I will stand on the top of the hill, Moses says, and then catch this, with the staff of God in my hand. With the staff of God in my hand. So rather than the picture that we often picture, which is this, I think this painter got it right. I think that's more the look that was going on here. And here's what I want to kind of zone in on so that we can get an understanding of what was going on here and what the meaning of this is. In Exodus 4, the rod of Moses turns into a snake. It's the first time that God says, take your rod and throw it on the ground. It becomes a snake. He picks it up by the tail. It becomes his rod again. Then in Exodus chapter 9, that same rod brings the seventh plague of hail. So it's used to bring a plague. Same thing in Exodus 10 with the eighth plague of locusts. It's used the rod to do it. Of course, in Exodus 14, we saw that Moses actually parts the Red Sea with this rod. And then just last week, we talked about in Exodus 17, the first part of the book or the chapter, that he used it to strike a rock and water came out of the rock. Now, at no time did Moses ever act like this rod was some mystical, magical, powerful staff, that the staff had the power. Never. It was always obvious and it was always known that God was the power, but that he worked through the staff of Moses as a visual for the people so that they could connect something that was tangible to God himself as he was doing these miracles so that you wouldn't just say, oh, maybe it was just coincidence that all those locusts came. No, it was really obvious when Moses held his rod over the land and the locusts started swarming in that was the conduit basically for God's power. So the rod was always the symbol of God's power. Now, today we have other things that kind of symbolize for us our allegiance to certain things, flags, banners, things like that. They didn't have a flag, they didn't have a banner, they didn't have any sort of national monument. All they had was a rod. That was it. And so, my best guess is that when Moses went up there and he held that rod, I'll pop that picture up again. He held that rod up above his head, and the Israelites, as they were fighting, could see that rod really reminded them that it was God who was going to have to win this battle. And when the rod disappeared because his hands got tired, his arms got really, really tired, and he would lower them, then the Amalekites would start to prevail. Here's the reason why. Had Israel ever fought before? No, they had never, ever been at war. These were people who had made bricks in Egypt. They had also been shepherds. They were probably, some of them, into the agricultural stuff. They had never been trained in war. They had never been trained in fighting. They had never been trained in tactics. This is hand to hand combat. And the Amalekites, being this nomadic people that went around fighting all the time, very skilled at it. The Israelites, I mean, Moses said, it's almost comical. Moses says to Joshua, "Go find some men who can fight." Like, okay, how will we know? They've never done this before. You can just imagine Joshua walking into the camp and saying, "Well, the Amalekites are going to come and attack us. And I'm just wondering if there's anybody here who wants to go fight them, and a bunch of, oh yeah, yeah, I want to go fight them. All right, well, here, take this, use that as a shield, and oh, you've got some swords. Pass those things around. Can you imagine? The only way that Israel doesn't get wiped off the map is if God rescues them from the Amalekites. And what happens when an underdog just blows away the competition? We celebrate that, and usually the underdog team or person or whoever it is, they heap some glory on themselves. Look what we did. Wow, they're proud and victorious. I think God wanted to make sure that even though they would be obviously celebratory and victorious, that none of them said, "Wow, look what we did. We're amazing fighters." They had to get done and be like, "We're not amazing fighters. God, he's the one who won that battle. We didn't win it. We could see the rod." When we could see the rod up there, up high, God was on our side. And when that rod was out of our purview, we didn't stand a chance. So that's what I'm thinking about. To pull back just a little bit more before we go on, if you really start to look at this and chapter 18 that we're about to get to at even a higher level, God is teaching Moses some stuff right now. And what he's going to teach him in our chapters tonight, in part, is Moses, you need help. You need other people. So Moses went up there. I don't know if he was thinking like how heavy this was going to get and how hard this was going to be to hold up for a long time. But all of a sudden, I mean, you can imagine it wouldn't, for me, it would take like 3 seconds probably. But for a nice, strong guy like Moses, it took a while before, the shaking would start. And then all of a sudden he couldn't hold it up and the rod went down and he looks out. Oh no, they're losing. Oh, I got to put my arms back up. So he had to have Aaron and Hur come and actually put a stone under him so he could sit down so they could prop up his arms. And that's what they did. So Moses needs help. He needs other people. And bless his heart, he never, ever, in anything that we're going to read tonight, not one time does he ever act arrogantly or say, "I don't need help. I can do this by myself," or "Who do you think you are?" He accepts the help. And I think that's a really good lesson for us as well. Well, let us go on to verses 14 to 16. It says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Write this as a memorial in a book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven.'" By the way, God is beginning to tell Moses to write things down. So it's going to be very helpful for the people that this and other things, and then scripture that we actually have today, will start to be codified so that they can know more about God and that they have something that's tangible to really look back on and read and study and realize who he is. It's such a gift. The Bible is such a gift to us. I don't think we even realize. Verse 15. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it, "The Lord is my banner." There you go. Saying, "A hand upon the throne of the Lord. The Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." Well, if you continue to read the Old Testament, you'll read more about the Amalekites. They keep popping up. At times, God tells the Israelites to utterly, completely destroy them, and they don't. And it comes back to bite them in a very bad way. In fact, Esther, if you're familiar with the book of Esther and the main character that's the dastardly villain, Haman, is a descendant of the Amalekites who were supposed to be wiped out but weren't. And so they do continue to come back. Now, eventually, they will get completely wiped out. They are totally gone. There are no Amalekites today. They're wiped out. But here's something that happened this week that I just like it set me back in my chair and I just went, "God, you never cease to amaze me and surprise me." So see if it strikes you the same way. I'm studying, I'm reading stuff. I'm reading secular, I'm reading sacred, I'm all sources, all kinds of sources. I do a lot of historical work on these things. And I read one author who I don't think is fond of Christianity at all and is not a Christian himself. And he's talking about the Amalekites and listen to what he said. He says at the end of his little write up about them, "Now," he said, "we don't know for sure that the Amalekites ever existed because there is absolutely zero archaeological evidence outside of the Bible to support their existence." If I can just direct you to verse 14, God says, "I will utterly blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven." And I sat back and I said, "Oh my goodness, here's a skeptic saying, we don't know if they existed because in other words, their memory is completely blotted out from under heaven." And he doesn't even know. Like you just shored up the word of God. Like that's exactly what God said he would do and you just concurred and filled us in that God actually did what he said he was going to do. By the way, there has never been any archaeological evidence that has disproved the Bible. Never. Sometimes we're lacking archaeological evidence, such as this. That doesn't disprove anything. There's a lot of archaeological evidence we don't have for most things that have happened in history. There's not that much, it's not that vast. But what we do have has only ever shown that the Bible has been accurate. It is trustworthy in every way, scientifically, historically, chronologically, biblically, theologically. It's perfect. And that's why you can trust it. And that is why we take an hour every Monday night and many of you other hours during your week and on Sundays too. And we study it because it is so profound and so life changing. We're going to go on to chapter 18. Let me just run over to the comments here. Emily is saying, "Is there any tie back to Moses's rock and the rock that Jacob lied on?" I don't know the answer to that, Emily. The rock that he was on. I'm sorry, can't answer the question. I doubt it. I doubt it. I've never heard of that being the case, but I could be wrong on that. I appreciate the question, though. All right, let's go on to chapter 18, verses 1 to 9. It says, "Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel and his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her home, Moses had sent her home, along with her two sons. The name of one was Gershom, for he said, 'I have been a sojourner in a foreign land.'" So his name meant sojourner. "And the name of the other, Eleazar, for he said, 'The God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh.'" So deliverer, helper. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness where he was encamped at the mountain of God. And when he sent word to Moses, your father in law, Jethro, I'm coming with you to you with your wife and with her two sons with her. Moses went out to meet his father in law and bowed down and kissed him. That would be a typical greeting in that time in the Middle East. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. So they have a conversation. Then Moses told his father in law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. So Jethro brings Moses' family back to him for reasons I'm not totally sure. Moses sent them back home. He probably is trying to protect the family or something. And then he ends up leading the people across the Red Sea and then through the wilderness, and he doesn't have his family with him. So Jethro, bless his heart, he's like, Zipporah and the guys, his kids, they need to be with husband and dad. So he takes them on a journey. He finds the children of Israel and he gives them back to Moses. So then they just go into the tent. And can you imagine? Wouldn't you just love to be a fly on the wall listening to this conversation where Jethro goes, so there's some rumors out there, Moses. And I mean, they are crazy. Please tell me what happened. And Moses goes, oh, let me confirm them. In fact, it's probably crazier than the rumors. And he just starts laying out what happened at the Red Sea and then how they didn't have water and God provided the water and through this tree, and the water was fine. And then we didn't have food. And we get manna every morning. In fact, tomorrow morning, you'll get to try it. It's amazing. It tastes really good, like donuts every morning. And then we were lacking water, and then God said, "Strike this rock," and the rock bursts open, and water comes out of it. And then you wouldn't believe what we just did with the Amalekites. I mean, it's just incredible. So Moses goes through the whole thing, and Jethro is just like on the edge of his seat listening to this, and it's amazing because Jethro's response is so perfect. He says, blessed be the Lord who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. So he's like, your God tops all the other gods. There's no question about it. And Jethro, Moses' father in law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father in law before God. So any doubts that he may have had have been very much dispelled by the stories that he believes of God. And isn't that just like that's the beauty of a personal testimony? Not that any of us probably have anything quite that significant as crossing the Red Sea and all of those things. But the point is, when you share what God has done in your life to somebody who's maybe on the fence or they're not sure, that could be the very thing that convinces them that, yeah, there's no way that this is all an accident. There's no way that God's not real. And so they listen to your testimony and it kind of helps inform them about who God is. Moving on. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning until evening. All right, so what does that mean that Moses was sitting around judging people? You can picture him. Is your hemline your hem's too short there? You need cover the knees, ladies, cover the knee. No, no, it wasn't that type of judgment. What he was doing is he was acting as a judge, arbitrating cases that would come up. I mean, we have at least 600,000 like able-bodied men here. We probably have a couple million people if you include all the women and all the children, young and old, everything in between. So what happened? They're all living together in close quarters. What happens when somebody goes, "Hey, I let that guy borrow my sheep and he killed it. And he won't give me one of his to replace it. Now I'm down a sheep. What am I supposed to do?" I mean, like, put on your Judge Judy hat. That's what Moses was doing all day. People were coming to him with court cases, basically. And Moses was sitting there and he was acting as judge, juror, all of it, and he was executing justice for all of these different things that were going on. So not only is he basically acting as the high priest at this point. One has not been appointed, but Moses is the liaison between God and the people. And sometimes he's between God and even Aaron, who will become the high priest. So he's acting as priest. He is the priest for the people. Now he's also acting as judge. He's also, of course, acting as supreme leader. He is the one in charge of making sure that everything is going well and taking the people where they need to go and making sure that he teaches them all of the statutes that God is telling him to teach. This is impossible. This is monumental. Nobody can do this job. It's way, way, way too big. So let's find out what Jethro says in verses 14 to 16. When Moses' father in law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father in law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws." So, have you ever felt like this? You've taken on a job. Maybe it's a volunteer position, maybe it's a ministry position, maybe it's actually what you do for a living. And when you take it, it's like, whew, it's a little daunting, but you can get your arms around it and you get good at it. And then all of a sudden one day you wake up and you realize this has gotten way out of hand. This thing has grown way beyond what I have any ability to handle. I can't do this by myself anymore. But by that time, you're so busy trying to keep from drowning, you don't have enough margin to fix that problem. And so you just keep the picture I have is like you're sinking underwater and just your lips are just like at the top, just your lips poking out of the water, just gasping for air, trying not to drown, but you don't have enough bandwidth to like hoist yourself up and look around and go, "I need help. Who's out there to do it?" I think that's kind of where Moses found himself. Like, whoa, this thing just got exploded out of hand. And I'd love to fix it, but I'm so busy every day. I don't have any time to even figure out, like, what do I do? So God sends Jethro to him to to question what's going on. So here are the problems that Moses has. First of all, he's all alone in this monumental task as judge. Even if that's all he did, it's too much for one person. Secondly, because the people, as we've been saying, have not been taught a whole lot about God, it's Moses' job to teach them. And so he's trying to do that too. Number three, he doesn't have time, as we just said, to have anybody help him because he's always busy. There's no margin for that. And so he has overrun his headlights and he needs help. And God knows that. And he sends his father in law to help him. So verses 17 to 18 say, Moses' father in law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone." I just so appreciate how Jethro approaches Moses on this. You know, he doesn't come and say, "What is wrong with you? What kind of leader are you anyway? No good leader leads like this. What, have you never heard of delegation?" He doesn't put him down at all. He comes and he just states he asks him a question, "What are you doing?" And then he says, "What you're doing is not good. You can't hold up under it." And I think he probably said it in a very caring and kind and compassionate way. And that is a lovely way to approach someone when you need to tell them, "I think we need to make some tweaks here," rather than going for the juggler. Maybe come along nicely beside them so that you're not being offensive, but that you can really, with compassion and care, say, "Can we rethink how this is going? Because I'm concerned for you. I'm concerned that you're going to die because nobody can hold up under what you're trying to hold up under right now." I mean, you would appreciate a friend, or in this case, a family member that would do that. Verses 19 to 20. Jethro continues, "Now obey my voice. I will give you advice, and God be with you." He says, "All right, I'm going to tell you some good advice. I hope you'll listen to me. I hope you'll do what I'm going to say." He says, "You shall represent the people before God, and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and laws and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Hmm, okay. Does that not sound exactly like what what Moses is doing right now? Yep, I would say, well, okay, Jethro, thank you for the advice. And I have no idea what kind of advice that is because I'm already doing all of that. However, he's not done. He's got more. He's saying what you're doing is good. Keep doing it. However, I'd like you to consider making some tweaks. Here are the tweaks. He says, moreover, in addition to that, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you, and you will be able to endure, and all this people will also go to their place in peace. Man, that is spot on. Great advice. He doesn't just say, "You need help, just go find some people. There you've got a lot of able-bodied people around here, go get some." He says, "No, you need to get the right kind of people." And of course, if you're gonna have a judge, nothing worse than a corrupt judge. I mean, that is just downright horrific. He said, "You want guys who are trustworthy, who fear God, who have a fear of God so that they're not liable to make really bad judgments because they know who they really answer to." Who don't take a bribe, who don't have people in the background going, "Hey, I'll slip you $100 if you'll, rule in my favor," and they pad their pockets and there's no justice. He says, "Don't get those kind of guys. Get guys who won't take a bribe." And then he says, "You need to delegate it out so that you have the really high capacity ones doing the high capacity jobs, lower capacity guys doing the lower capacity ones. Maybe the really wise ones take the tougher cases. And the ones who are younger and they're still coming up, they're wise, but they're still learning how give them the easier cases. And then the stuff that's just like nobody can figure it out. This is really rough. Have them bring those cases to you, Moses. And in that case, the whole machine is going to run well oiled. Everybody's going to be fine. You're not going to die. They're not going to die. And it will just be so much better for you and for the nation as a whole. Verses 24 to 27. So Moses listened to the voice of his father in law and did all that he had said. Wow, he is a humble, wise man. Moses chose able men out of all of Israel and made them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, just like Jethro said. And they judged the people at all times. So it wasn't just a momentary thing. This was their job now. Any hard case they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father in law depart, and he went away to his own country. Here's the thing, beyond just leadership 101, delegation. Do you want this to be sustainable, you have to delegate. I think that's really obvious, and for those of you who are natural born leaders, you're just like, high five, spot on, perfect advice. But let's back out just even a little bit further here. There have been a number of times in our ministry. My husband's a pastor, if you're not aware of that. He's a pastor here at Christ First Church, lead pastor. There have been so many times in our ministry life that we receive what my husband Lee likes to call just in time information, where we're serving, we're doing our absolute best to follow the Lord and do what his word says and love people and be honest and teach the word and blah 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 blah. And all of a sudden God sends somebody at the right moment with some piece of information that we desperately needed but didn't know we needed that changes everything for us. If I had a quarter for every time that happened in our ministry, we'd probably just go ahead and retire right now. It would be an astronomical amount of money because it has happened so many times. And I remember way back at the beginning of our ministry in Arizona, we were at a tiny little church of about 65 people on a strong Sunday. And God began to send couples, families, people to that little itty bitty church, and Lee and I would say so often, what would we have ever done had God not sent that person along or that family along or that group along? I mean, that person will change the trajectory of our church because they bring a certain skill set or they bring a certain amount of wisdom in an area that we were lacking or they have vision for something that we didn't have. And God sends the right people at the right time. And this is what I'm seeing in chapter 17 and 18 of Exodus with Moses. When he needed Aaron and Hur to hold up his arms so that he could hold that staff up, God sent the right guys to sit there for hours on end and hold up his arms. Not guys that were going to be like, hey, it's my turn to hold the rod. How come you get to hold the rod all the time? Give it to me. I want to turn. I want to hold it. They knew that it was Moses's rod and that God had used Moses with the rod. So they were fine to play second string. They sat there and they held his arms. It was perfect. When Moses is about to die because he's got way too much on his plate and no ability to fix it because he doesn't even have time to think about it because he's too busy, God sends his father-in-law, Jethro, who can stand back, assess the situation, and say, here's my recommendation. Moses takes it. So what I want you to end with tonight is, first of all, I hope that as I'm even talking, that you can look back in your own life and say, maybe I've never thought about that before, but yeah, there have been times when I can definitely say, wow, God, thank you for bringing that person into my life at that moment. I didn't know I needed them, but I needed what they were able to bring to the table. So I hope you can rejoice in that. But I also want us to look forward as we serve God. And I know a number of you wake up every day and you're like, God, what do you want me to do today? I'm yours. So, however I can serve you, just lead me in that direction. Be also on the lookout for those just in time people that God will put in your path that will give you advice or vision or help or support or whatever it is. Maybe you need a partner to partner with in a ministry that you're doing. God will bring that person along at the absolutely exact right time. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about God and why it's so fun to serve him despite all the pitfalls and all, the darts from the enemy that we suffer. There is something so serene and amazing knowing that God is overseeing the whole thing and that he gives you exactly what you need at the exact time that you need it. So I hope that encourages you tonight. Well, thank you for being with us for Bible Study Hub. We will look forward to, Lord willing, being together again next Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Facebook and YouTube Bible Study Hub. Always glad to have you. I pray for you. I love you. And I hope to see you again next week. So take care.